This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast brought to you by the Genesis Company, coming at you Thursday morning. It's November 30th. I've got Britt Robson here with me today, who just wrote a column on the impact of Anthony Edwards thus far this season. Check that out over at minpost.com. Britt, I think it's kind of perfect timing for that column because this evening, Wolves Jazz, it seems they're going to play their first game without Anthony Edwards this season, who he's listed as doubtful after crashing the floor there, right hip pointer. You started your column kind of running through the numbers of how much better this Wolves team has been with Ant on the floor versus Ant off the floor. Huge gap, obviously. But there's kind of like, there's two factors, right, that impact the size of one of those gaps. It's how well a team plays with a player on the floor, what they're doing then. And that other side of like a gap doesn't need to be huge and a player could still be playing really well, right? There's a big deal here.
Like Tatum, for example, has I think it's like over 11 points better.
Okay.
In other words, his net rating is over 11.8, I think, plus 11.8. But when he's off the court, the Celtics are plus 3-1. So if you take the net on off, he's really 8 points better for his team when he plays versus when he sits. Some of that is depth, of course. Some of that is cohesion, whatever. But Ant is significant both ways. Ant is extremely helpful to the team's success when he's on the court. And when he is off the court, the team has a lot of trouble, especially on offense, trying to figure out how to play well enough to keep him on. And I think what's most impressive is that they're 14-4.
Yeah.
Or whatever, 13-4, I guess. But whatever it is, they have one of the three best records in basketball. And this guy means his net on off, which is the stat. I don't know if it's a thing. I calculated it longhand or whatever. But at the end of the day, 20.5 points per 100 possessions is the value of Ant on the floor versus Ant off the floor in how the Wolves have played through the first 17 games. And it's not, it's still a small sample size. We're a fifth of the way through the season. But it's 600 minutes, 600 minutes. It's not nothing. And it's held pretty much all season. I think I was tempted to, headline it or whatever, that Ant might be the most underrated player on the Wolves. I mean,
we'll make the case.
Well,
or make the counter cases, I guess. Like I don't think that's like it's him or Rudy, right? Like that's
I think that a lot of, or you could say Conley, you could say Slow-Mo. There's a lot of people who contribute to the Wolves' secret sauce that has been different this year. But Ant has always been more glitz than substance. It's not a knock against him. He's young. And some of the things he didn't do, a lot of the little things that contribute to winning in the past. And I think that's more than anything else in this column. What I wanted to point out was that Ant's presence on the floor and his attitude towards his teammates and the way he conducts himself within the roster framework, both in the locker room and on the court, are all winning atmospheres. Right. He is creating a leadership atmosphere of winning that is obviously influenced by, the savvy vets they've brought in, but they can't do what Ant does. They can't magnetize the floor like he does. They can't be the person. They can't be the alpha in the room saying that guy, my teammate is great, and so, and they can't, anybody who's played sports even a little bit, I've played a little bit, I haven't played a lot, but if a guy is phenomenally better than almost anybody else, what they say and do matters within the context of a team. And the fact that Ant has been able to clean up the little stuff that were flaws in his game and also remain not only a level-headed, cool guy, but somebody who willingly, I mean, when he and Cat are on the floor, there's no dissension there in terms of who hogs the ball, who doesn't, who takes shots, who doesn't. And tribute to Cat on that too, as well as Ant. But the point being is that it is, I know these are silly debates, but it is Ant's team. And he is the straw that stirs the drink on this team, as all the cliches, whatever, pick a cliche. But at the end of the day, his improvement across the board, I mean, he's gotten better every year with assists, rebounds, whatever. But at the end of the day, what we're seeing is a 22-year-old kid creating one of the best teams in the NBA.
So a couple things of that. One, like, this is going to get stress tested tonight, right? Are they actually as bad as they've been with Ant off the floor, for a whole game? And I think that's a kind of interesting conversation let's have in a second. But I want to talk about where we were at in our heads with Ant coming into the season versus where we're at today. And, it's our job. So we're just focusing on Anthony Edwards significantly more than even really smart basketball people who kind of started locking in on him during FIBA in the summertime. And it became, and you wrote this in your column, it became this, not even like assumption, but kind of like a given after FIBA that Ant was a top 15 player in the NBA now. And,
he didn't merit that at the time.
But you had to kind of, not to be like that guy, you had to be watching and you had to know,
right.
But you kind of did, right? Like you put it in your season preview column that Ant's next leap requires upgrading some of the subtle but damaging flaws in his game. And so we kind of came into this season being like, all right, he's gonna be another year older, but there are some subtle but damaging flaws in his game. Like, to be that top 15 player in the league that a lot of people are presuming he is, not all of those need to be taken care of, but a lot of them. And I think probably, frankly, or honestly, more than we thought he could just do right away at the beginning of the season. And he absolutely has. And we could talk about what some of those subtle flaws were, but I didn't think Anthony Edwards was a top 15 player in the NBA coming into this season.
Right.
And I know because I actually really thought about that as I was kind of running some numbers on all NBA and going through it, because it's literally 15, right? That's how best 15 players make all NBA this season. That equals like $45 million more for Ant. But he is, I think it's fair to say at this point of the season, he is a top 15 player. I looked up estimated win shares. He's 14th thus far on the season. And honestly, that probably undersells a lot of some of the other numbers, or just the eye test of what we're watching night to night, which you're kind of highlighting in your column. So I think it's worth talking about what has he removed from his game, and I guess simultaneously added. What is sticking out most to you there?
I think what is sticking out most for me is his commitment to focusing play to play. I didn't wind up with enough room to write this in my piece, but there's a lot of footage and even some memes about Ant standing around his first year or two in the league.
Yeah.
Just, if he wasn't going to get the ball, he was just going to wait, and that doesn't happen now. I mean, if you watch, Ant is moving a lot, and Ant also has learned how to engage on a team-wide level. And the only way that really happens is when you buy into team schemes. I don't think he was bought into team schemes enough to be a good team player. If you're not dedicated to the scheme on defense, or you don't know how to execute the scheme because it's frustrating and you're already doing a lot of other things well and you're young, then those things kind of fall by the wayside. If you ask me what I think his biggest improvement has been, it's that he's been culling information from guys like Mike Conley and Rudy Gobert, listening to them seriously, listening to what Finch has to say as a coach, and then putting it into practice. He's always said he's been motivated by winning, and everybody who's ever been associated with him says he's a really hard worker who wants to win. And I think this offseason was the year where I think it was his put up or shut up moment to himself. And that's what I see evident on the court. I see a team player who also understands that sometimes he's just got to go out and get his. The third quarter the other night in OKC, 11 straight points when they were down 8 coming into the second half. That type of thing he can do. But then there's also driving the length of the court, having 3 guys around him, whipping the pass out to Naz Reid in the corner for a wide open tray. That probably would have happened last year. But when Naz clanked the tray, getting up between 2 Thunder players and keeping the ball alive, tipping the ball so that Naz gets the ball, that's the kind of play that didn't happen last year. And that I think, to me, is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about focus and teamwork.
I'll add something to the teamwork element of this, and this is like a really small anecdote from the last game. But what I think I'm most surprised about is not Ant understanding what his own subtle flaws were and accommodating some of those, getting better in those areas. Like, I'm impressed by that. But what I really didn't expect, and I've noticed a handful of these, is he seems to understand what the weaknesses of the group are and the areas in which the team gets exposed, and kind of going out of his way as a leader to, point that out or accommodate for those things. And this is super simple, basic, but the Wolves are shooting free throws. I think it was Rudy was shooting. So Cat is down there to get the offensive rebound on the free throw attempt, which, you're probably going to do when Rudy's going. And what the Thunder always do is they send their 2 guys back to the opposite corners over there. And Rudy's shooting the second free throw, and Ant starts yelling to Cat, who's guarding like Case and Wallace or something at the time, because Cat's guarding Smalls, often maybe Jalen Williams. I don't know. But he's guarding somebody who's not down getting the rebound. And Ant's like, yo, your guy is back here in the corner. I got the other corner guy. You got this one. Rudy takes the free throw. Cat doesn't go for the offensive rebound and immediately sprints back to that corner because Ant alerted him to that. Normally, and it would be understandable, Cat might go for that offensive rebound, and then whether OKC grabs that defensive rebound or just grabs it out of the net, they go push and they run Cat up off the floor.
Baseball pass, right?
Exactly. It's the hit ahead pass, and it actually went to Cat's side, and Cat was there to stop the action. They swung it. Somebody else, missed a jumper, and the Wolves secure the rebound there. And I think that's like, I think literally, if Ant doesn't do that, the Thunder get 2 points and whatever. 2 points matter. It's not.
It does matter,
but it matters. But there's also a crushing impact to those, like, we're out of position. Our roster construction is weird, so we're cross-matched. I mean, that was such a staple of the beginning of last season, where there just wasn't that awareness from Ant or Cat or anyone that was like, hey, we need to be super attentive to this stuff. And for the 22-year-old kid, again, it's just a small little thing, but he was the one who saw it. He alerted Cat to it, and Cat was like, yep. And he sprinted right back the other way. And that's was one of the biggest flaws of this team a season ago, was obviously transition defense when the 2 bigs were on the floor. So I think it's that stuff for me that I'm most impressed with by Ant. I thought we would always see some internal progression from him, but to do it as a leader and for the group as a whole, that's big time.
Well, and also he has, and we've seen it, he's gotten better on defense every year, but they haven't been leaps. This year, I think, has been the most significant leap in that I think the Wolves' best defense with Ant on the court prior to this year was 2 years ago when they were giving up like 110 points or whatever it is, maybe 111. I can't remember what I wrote.
It was 110.6, I think.
Okay, 110.6. Okay, so right now it's 104.6. And you would say, oh, yeah, well, that's because Rudy's doing his thing and everybody and the Wolves have a top defense in the NBA. That doesn't change the fact that when Ant is on the court, they are the Wolves are 2 points per 100 possessions better. They're 104.6. As a team, they're 106.6. And Ant, among all 5 starters, has the best rating as a defensive rating among all 5 starters. And some of that, yeah, you could say it's all rotations or whatever. And when Cat and Rudy play together, you're going to have some variation defensively there because of that inherent flaw to some extent. But Ant has been the guy who hung around with the second unit, and then he hasn't been the guy who hung around with the second unit.
Sure.
So he's been with the starters and he's been with the blend. He's been the starter with the blend. And it comes down to the fact that we used to be able to identify. In fact, it's one of the reasons I wrote what I wrote at the beginning of the season about is subtle but significant flaws. We would see, and yet even now, I mean, I'm not going to totally say he's a perfect player. He'll get beat on the baseline every now and then, backdoor. But he has cleaned up his peripheral vision and awareness, which was the thing that I was most concerned about. Could he actually stay in the game mentally as a team defender? And the fact that the Wolves have to do switching and zone as well as, everything else they do on man ball defense, he's been a very consistent defender this year. In addition to, and he hasn't lost that ceiling where if you want Ant to go get somebody for a couple of possessions, he's probably the best on-ball defender on the team when so challenged. So, and that includes Jaden McDaniels, in my opinion, because Ant doesn't foul as much. True. So, if he's not on the court, the Wolves scored 99.8 points per 100 possessions. That is 5 points lower than the worst offense in the Portland Trailblazers right now.
That's the really glaring part of that statistic, and it's why I'm like, oh, that might be part of the reason why it's obviously part of the reason why the differential is so big, and it's what we should be thinking about tonight, or kind of going into this weekend. We're assuming Ant's gonna miss this Thursday game against Utah, but maybe Saturday against Charlotte as well, and the offense is thus going to be tested to do and be more than it is. Let me grab our first break, but then I want to talk about who starts and like what that all looks like. Today's show is brought to you by Falling Knife Brewing Company, and with games on Thursday and Saturday this week. The Saturday game's like a 4:00 game. I feel like that's kind of a perfect time to afternoon brewery session, go and watch the Wolves there against Charlotte. Obviously, Falling Knife plays all the games on their TVs with the sound. So if you listen to this on Thursday, obviously got the game to check out there on Thursday night, but Saturday might be fun as well. And they wanted me to let you guys all know that they have that Rectangle Pizza truck that has like a residency there. So Tuesdays through Thursdays, the Rectangle Pizza truck is there from 5 to 9. And now on the weekends, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 4 to 9. So again, for that Saturday game, there will be a Rectangle Pizza truck there. So you can drink and eat. Falling Knife doesn't have like a kitchen per se, but they have these trucks there to give you the opportunity to spend an extended period of time there, hanging out, watching the Wolves, having some beers and eating food. So
yeah, Detroit pizza.
Detroit, we've broken this down before.
Detroit pizza is like Chicago pizza, only even deeper to some extent.
I guess we still don't know exactly what the definition is, but many people, when we were referring to it as Chicago pizza, correct?
No. Detroit pizza is a little different.
Yeah, well, the listeners will have to go.
But anyway, it's good. It's good pizza.
We'll have to go try it out. Okay, so Falling Knife this Thursday night or this weekend. Check that out. We love that Falling Knife is creating a Wolves community there. All right, Britt. Let's talk about what this looks like. No Ant tonight. He's listed as doubtful, which anybody else.
You never know with Ant, right?
He just might make an executive decision. But let's assume that he's out. What is who is in the rotation? Do you add any additional person, and who starts?
That's a good question. I think that if you're going momentum wise, you'd have to say that Troy Brown and Nah are the two guys that are, the traditional three starters, Cat, Mike Conley, and Rudy. And then alongside them, Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Troy Brown Jr. I don't think you are disrespecting Shake Milton by having Troy Brown Jr. start over him. If Shake Milton is honest with himself, he would say if the shoe were on the other foot, he would feel like he deserves to start. Shake Milton has not been shafted. Chris Finch has had a pretty long leash with him. It's very slowly but surely gotten tighter. And the reason it has is because he's in his own head. It certainly looks like he's in his own head too much. He's short-arming shots. He's making passes that are betrayed by a lack of decisiveness. His judgment is off, I think, at the moment, because he's kind of understanding that he's not playing well and beginning to question himself on the court. And also he's one of those players that is an aggression-oriented player. One of the things that Finch liked about him when I talked to him preseason in that long interview was his decisiveness and willingness and ability to get his own when Rudy's on the court or whatever. And that has betrayed him. He's looked clumsy. He's had line drive shots. He's not that accurate right now. About the only argument I can think of to have.
I have an argument.
Okay.
I think Shake should start. And I'm basing it off of the fact that that's where he played his best basketball last season in such a similar situation. He always started when James Harden was out. And Shake's numbers last year, just when he came off the bench, 6.4 points per game, 2.1 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 50% from 2, 36% from 3. When he started 11 games in place of James Harden, 20.3 points per game, 5 rebounds, 7.2 assists, 56% from 2, 41% from 3. He might be one of those guys, man, like that, giving him, at least we have that to point to from last season, that what is that type of guy that you can give the bigger role to, is probably not good enough to be a starter, but has some of that game to be a starter, where given the opportunity could do that. And I know I see you shaking your head over there, and I'm not shaking my head.
I do think that here's my only counter argument to agree with you.
Let's be clear. There's 17 games of counter argument where Shake Milton has not looked above solid.
But even more than that, I think that the way Kyle Alexander has played on offense recently, having both Shake and Kyle Anderson in the game at the same time, I'd be in favor of staggering those guys. I don't think right now they're good together on the court.
Wait, staggering Shake and Kyle Anderson. Oh, from spacing, Shake and Kyle Anderson. I thought you said Keel at first. You actually did mess that up. My ears messed that up.
No, it's okay. No problem. So I think slow-mo, for whatever reason, I I'm a conspiracy theorist on this. I think he's got something wrong with his eyes. Just the way he's shooting and the way he's turning down threes. He was a willing 3-point shooter last year, and teams are now leaving him wide open.
Mm-hmm.
He bricks them pretty badly. He's still disinclined to shoot. Where he can shoot well is nearsightedness. Right around his floater still works okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if Shake is clanking and Slow-Mo is clanking on the court together, and you don't have Ant to bail you out, and it isn't Cat's night,
You gotta stagger those two then.
I would
Shake and Kyle.
That's what I mean. So that's an argument. Either start, in other words, don't go with the lineup I suggested, because that does bring them both off the bench kind of at the same time. Maybe start Slow-Mo,
I think that's what will happen.
Uh-huh.
I think we've just kind of seen that pattern from Finch and the trust. And last year there was a lot of that. And I think that makes sense. Start Kyle at the 3, start Nikhil at the 2, Mike at the 1, obviously the bigs there. I just am like, all right, you scouted, liked, lauded Shake Milton in the offseason and that signing. Why? If it wasn't for this, if it wasn't for this idea that he can be something bigger and more,
it's a good point.
Then his role, because clearly he's not just been like a ninth man, and that is, as I understand it, his pattern in Philly. And a lot of people rip Doc for this, but it just kind of was. It was like he was in the rotation playing a lot, or he was out. He never really had that, again, as I understand it, I could be wrong here, but that ninth man, least in the rotation, least minutes while in the rotation. And we know from having watched the league enough, some guys don't
Malik Beasley.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know. I guess it seems like an opportunity. If you're really invested and you're like, we are going to play Shake Milton in this rotation all season by hell or high water, take the risk tonight against Utah to break him out of a shitty start to the season. I think that makes some sense. Obviously, Kyle makes some sense too. You can make the argument.
Here's what bothers me about Kyle starting, why I initially went Troy Brown. This team really misses a backup point guard. Mm-hmm. J-Mac is really missed on this team.
Sure.
And I think that's actually one of the reasons why the disparity with Ant on and off is so great. Sure. Is because Ant is third on the team in assist percentage, behind Conley and Slow-Mo in that order. Ant is a willing passer, and he's also a very good passer. It wasn't the first thing that I was going to mention when you asked what was the most impressive thing, because I think we saw some of that, especially in January of last season. But I do think that he is a playmaker when he's on the court. So to bring Slow-Mo and Conley, Conley's minutes are precious. They overplayed him the other night. You really want to make sure he gets only 5 or 6 minutes in the first quarter, I think, so you can save him in case it gets close late. But I do think having Slow-Mo and Conley on the court at the same time is using a precious resource with redundancy. I would much rather have those guys staggered, I think.
Mm-hmm. And obviously there's going to be some natural staggering, and it's going to be rotated.
And Utah's going to have a lot to do with this, and the tenor of the game and all this other stuff. Yeah.
It might be a couple games. So I don't know if we'd be spending as much time on it if it was just it's just going to be tonight and then Ant's going to be back, which could be the case too. I'm just curious in that it could be an opportunity for some pecking order definition, right? You know what I'm saying? And it gets Kyle back in some of a rhythm. It breaks Shake out of this, or it just you could really assert that we're about Troy Brown now. We've seen these last few games, he's in the firmament. We're going to start him here in Ant's absence. I'm just it'll be interesting and telling as to where Finch is in his head about kind of the bench guys, which is the biggest concern about this team right now.
And other people have said this. I'm not this isn't new information, but if you regard Troy Brown Jr. as this year's Taurean Prince, and then you think back to the way Taurean Prince was used, Finch was kind of loath to start Taurean Prince because he liked what Taurean brought off the bench. He brought movement. He brought hustle.
But who started when Ant got hurt last year and made 8 threes in New York?
Shake Milton.
No.
No, I know. It was. But that, you have to admit, that was an outlier game. Taurean Prince will never make 8 threes again in his life and hadn't before that.
But he had the balls to take them. He had the like willingness to like vacillate into a higher usage player and take those shots. I'm just saying, like, that's part of plugging a bench guy into a starter role. You either want the guy to be like, all right, you're the lowest usage dude in the bunch, or here's your chance. Go be a starter. Go get 20.
All right. So do you want the guy who basically took 2 shots the other night and I'm screaming, no, 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 and they both go in? One was a 3 with 90 seconds left, and another was a tough layup with 30 seconds left. That was Troy Brown Jr.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking for a guy who has a lot of confidence in himself right now, I don't know how many of those line drives are going in tonight if it's Shake Milton. You know?
Yeah, no, I think you understand where I'm coming from.
I am definitely, and I actually did say before, I think that's a good point and it's smart. And players are creatures of habit. And if you want to give Shake Milton yet another break, this is one of the biggest breaks you can give him, because one of the things that happens when you start versus sit is you have a new slate in your mind. You say, okay, I'm starting. This is my mindset tonight. My mindset is different. And Shake Milton could use a mindset reset, you know? And so that's another argument for it. And not for nothing, I think that guys like Sexton and Clarkson can be bullied. And so, having a big combo guard back there like Shake also wouldn't hurt in terms of the way the Wolves play D tonight.
Probably the bigger question is just like, where do you get team offense from? Like you said, sub 100 offensive rating with Ants off the floor. I think Jason and I were kind of talking about this yesterday, where I kind of just did the simple connection of like, all right, you just run the offense more through Cat, and you just lean into higher usage for that. And Jason was like, I don't know if you might be setting yourself up for failure there, in that you're forcing it to Cat. Like, just continue to play through the flow and expect Cat to, kind of naturally rise to the top as the best.
Here's what would worry me about that. What would worry me about that is that if Cat is going to put 2 and 2 together, if the game plan is, okay, Cat, we're running the offense through you, you know what Cat's going to do when he hears that. You think those wayward lobs and dishes to Rudy now are unwise. Wait till he starts whipping the ball around as like the new playmaker on the team. If
cynical.
Well, I've got many years of watching Cat be the guy on offense. What I would rather say to Cat is, you're our guy. You need to go get 35 tonight. I'll put on my Shaquille O'Neal hat, and basically say he's got to get 30 if they're going to win.
Okay, so you're saying be a scorer, not a playmaker.
Be a scorer, not a playmaker. Exactly, which Cat can do. If one thing you know about that dude, he can score when he puts his mind to it.
Yeah, I think I'm with Jace, and like, just play through the flow. Let's and yeah, there's going to be those breakout moments or whatever you need. Like, Ant gets you the 11 straight points to start the third quarter, and like, maybe I think about the Golden State games where like half of the third quarter was like Conley Towns 2-man game. I think you can find those 5-6 possessions in a row situation a couple times without this game feeling like the game when you tried to get Cat 60 against the Spurs.
Yeah, and Utah is not. I mean, they don't have Markkanen, who's their best player, and they are not world beaters with Markkanen. I think they look much. Obviously, we caught them on an off night when they came here last time, and got beat by 30 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
They seem like they're much more comfortable rebuilding this year than they were last year. And so you can probably stick with the program, keep the momentum, keep your systems in place, win with defense and transition, whatever. It does sound like Walker Kessler is now becoming a bigger part of the offense. I thought that was bewildering that you took your best young player and decided to make him irrelevant in that last game. I think that if Kessler is in the low block more often, they're a more formidable team. Mm-hmm. And I just think that they'll probably put up a better game tonight. Certainly, I would think so than they did the last time. I mean, the Wolves should win this game, and they should win this game fairly handily. They should actually win the next 4 games fairly handily. It's always.
But to do so, you're going to need to have figured out how to play at a significantly higher level without Anthony Edwards. Because
yes,
I would say at least one of those games you're not going to have him. And I don't think we've defined what that looks like. I don't know if we know.
I agree.
What that is, and
but
I think
should we? And your argument, and it's not a bad one, is that the flow will determine it. Mm-hmm. I worry that we are going to be relying on whether or not up and down performers on offense like Rudy Gobert and Nickeil Alexander-Walker have it that night. I can see Rudy, I can see a 3 for 9 from Rudy with 3 turnovers against Walker Kessler. And, that's going to be gruesome if that happens. I can see Nah missing his first couple of shots and getting in a funk. And then, you rely. I mean,
okay, but and I don't disagree with that. I'm just devil's advocate here. The alternative is, like you said, put your Shaq head on and say, "Go get me 35, Carl." Where does he get 35? That probably is more post-up opportunities, correct?
No, I think he starts from outside and then does the up fake drive thing.
Okay.
I would always start Cat on the perimeter.
Okay. I mean, he will get post touches too, but that's fair. That's what I asked. Like, where's the primary spot? I think in either of those spots, he's going to be guarded by John Collins, and it's going to be
just abused last time.
Sure, exactly. That's why I was kind of thinking the post, but you're going to have Kessler or Yurtsevens been playing a lot for them too. He's a 7-foot big body, lurking big at the rim. Like, if Cat's on the post or if Cat's on the drive, he's going to need to get through Collins, I'd assume, and then also navigate the big at the rim. And with its Kessler, a really elite shot blocker, which, tempts you into more of those Rudy lob passes, which are gold or crap. Right. And I don't know. I'm curious to see if, I don't think we really, well, I know we haven't seen it this year because Ant's played. We haven't seen like a go get 35 game Cat. Like, he's had big games, but
we certainly remember it. It was it was the Wolves offense for 3 years.
Yeah, exactly. And so he has it. We think he's back healthy. It'll be a little bit of a different configuration of the offense with Ant out there. I don't say any of this to mean I know what the answer is or isn't. I'm mostly curious to see, one, if Finch leans into it, and 2, what Cat's able to do with that role against a team that I think can defend the rim pretty well.
And as we look at alternatives, Conley missed his last 7 trays, but he's been a 40% shooter for 3 years and is smart enough. Mike Conley can always get open for 3. I don't doubt that in terms of quote unquote getting your own shot, Mike Conley is pretty brilliant at either using his classic move is the high step back pick and roll with Rudy, but he's also good at weaving and then stepping back out on the dribble. And he's good at straight pick and roll going to the weak side as the third man. I think he'll get points. I think that either Shake will be Philadelphia Shake or Troy Brown will be the guy whose constant movement and internal momentum gets him some garbage and gets him some backdoor cuts and everything. I think they can fill in. I worry is too much on Na and too much on Rudy.
Yeah. I think one way to account for that is to direct more offense to Nas.
Oh, yeah, Nas. Well, I mean, and we haven't even talked about the three bigs, which I asked the question, but you were the one that prompted the question in me that I asked Finch after the game, because you asked me at a point, do you go with the three bigs? It was a logical idea, except that I think that, I told you after a pregnant pause, no, but it was because OKC's ball movement is so good.
Well,
and the three bigs, I'm not sure Utah's ball movement is that good.
No, it's not.
They don't have I mean, they relied on Markkanen a lot like the Wolves rely on Ant.
Yeah, that's true. So the reason I said it was like Cat was out for like the whole middle of the fourth quarter and Troy Brown's kind of rolling there. So it was like more of a delayed pause until Cat got back into the game, and Finch calls a timeout, and Cat's coming back in, and it was Rudy, Nas, Troy, Mike, and Nikhil on the floor, and like the two guys that were going right then were Nas and Troy, and I was like, you probably want to leave maybe both of them in. You could at least make a case for Nas. He had like just had that back down of Shea and
absolutely
put that right hand hook shot in on the right block. So that's why I thought about it, because Ant wasn't even, obviously Ant couldn't play. Ant was out for the game. I don't think the three big thing makes sense outside of like bit pieces here and there when Ant is playing. I think it makes sense to consider in situations when you need offense when Ant is out of the game, you know? And so maybe to that end, that's why I don't think he'll start with it. But could you get, midway through the second quarter and Utah's up by 4 and it's just a product of your offense not going? Like, I don't know. Your three bench guys today are going to be some combination of Nas, Kyle, Shake, and Troy. Like, who's your best offensive player of that? Or who's the one who can get hottest? It's Nas, for sure. Like, give you that boom. And to that end, like, you might have to consider that at some point here. And I'm just like, in general, I feel like I've been talking about this too much, but like, just a little underwhelmed by Nas's utility in the offense. He's just a little too much spot up 3-point shooter for my taste, given his skill set. And I wouldn't say it's that big of a deal if we didn't have this looming sort of issue of the offense not overall being mediocre and being really bad when Ant's off the floor.
I thought about this some in terms of the three bigs. I think San Antonio is the place to spring that.
Okay.
I think that would be a good matchup. Vassell being the, can you guard Vassell out on the perimeter that way? But I think the more I think about how well Nas and Cat have begun to be comfortable in space, especially when you could zone and switch.
Which you could probably do all of these next 4 games.
Exactly. But especially, again, I mean, you got Wemby. You don't want to deal with Wemby and Rudy unless Wemby's on the block, I think. I think that you can chase Wemby with switching bigs that aren't Rudy necessarily out there.
Sure.
Especially if Zach Collins is alongside him. But anyway, I what I like, what kind of the sub theme of this pod is about is we talked about at the beginning of the season, it's less true now, but this is a deep team. This is a good roster, a deep roster. Well, here we go. No Jaden, no Ant, no J-Mac. Those are all guys who give you very specific things on offense that are important. Now, Ant obviously by far the most important, but J-Mac's pace and playmaking and Jaden's safety valve decision-making are very important to a high-functioning offense too. And the fact that all those things are absent now begins to get into, all right, if Slow-Mo is, for some reason, he doesn't have confidence in his shot right now, especially from deep.
Can I say something on that quick? I didn't say before. That happened all the time in the Memphis years. I just pulled it up when you were talking about it before. Like the frequency with which he shot threes went up and down year to year. And I know we can point to the glass, like he's taking the glasses off and all that.
Right.
I'm not saying that's not a factor.
Right.
Historically, he's been am I feeling my shot? I'm going to keep taking it, or I lose confidence in it and I trust my little fidget spinner game to the basket,
Right.
And so I don't, we should ask Kyle about that. It's kind of a hard question to ask.
Yeah.
But we should,
and I don't think he's going to answer it honestly.
Yes.
And my only counter to that is he ever shot 18% for a season from deep.
Honestly, probably.
You think so? Well, I didn't realize that.
28.
Well, still, that's not good. All right. Mm-hmm. So maybe you're right. Maybe the last season was a huge outlier.
Well, it literally was.
Uh-huh.
His 3-point percentages for his career by year: 30, 38, 37, 34, 28, 29, 36, 33, 41 last year, and 20 this year. I mean, some of those years, this earlier years, he just wasn't taking very many of them. And so I always say, like, 3-point percentage is not your 2K rating from three, but
yeah, exactly.
It's so much. It's an interesting topic to me, like bigger picture, because we were talking about it during the OKC game when it was the Shake and Kyle minutes. What was that? Like, it was late third after Ant got hurt. And I'm like, dude, there's no spacing out here because the book's out on, like, I don't know. I feel like you get scouted more meticulously when you're a really good team. Teams know that Kyle's not shooting them this year and that Shake's not confident.
And especially, if you have a really good team, you search for vulnerabilities. Mm-hmm. And you also, what team isn't thinking about attacking the Nuggets when Jokic is off the floor? That's like scouting 101. Mm-hmm. And so what team isn't going to say, all right, when Ant sits, how can we just totally throttle this already depleted offense,
Right.
And one of the ways would be let Shake and Kyle Anderson shoot.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned into the preseason with 11-man rotation, right? Kind of knew that was going to get pared down.
Sure.
Two bodies, and the two bodies that got paired out pretty much were J-Mac and Troy Brown Jr. But so you go from that 11, and now tonight you have no Ant, no Jaden, no J-Mac. You're down to 8. Are they just going to play 8? And if it was a 9th, I don't know, like, who would the 9th guy be?
Well, I think that coming into the season before Summer League, there was hope that Josh Minott could be a combo forward. That hasn't happened to my satisfaction.
He also hasn't played.
Yeah, no, I know, but I meant,
to their satisfaction.
He did not look ready to play small forward in Summer League. They were a loose team on purpose in some way. They were trying to get Wendell Moore to play the point. They were trying to get Leonard Miller to be, bouncing around. Mm-hmm. They were not like a bully ball low post team in that way. They were running a lot.
What about Wendell tonight?
Well,
okay, let's go through the options are Josh Minott, Wendell Moore Jr.
I just think it's wasted minutes.
Yeah, I'm not, and maybe the answer is just 8. I'm going to say
Yeah,
it
I mean,
could be 9.
and I actually think of all the options we have, Leonard Miller is not a bad option.
I'd like to see. Yeah. I mean, I guess
I would rather see him in the game against this team with its length than Minott, unless you could get into one of those. If you played Minott with Troy Brown Jr. and if you played it like one of those chaos lineups, Nas, maybe at the center or something, that might work. If you played old Iowa Ant style and you're flying around, I can see Minott being there. But if you want to keep your sets, I think that Leonard Miller has a chance to be, then you keep Kyle at the 3 and you play Leonard Miller. I don't know.
It's an interesting one. I unfortunately, I think it's a lot of interesting answers, but none I really love. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. All I'm saying is, I mean, not to be a jerk about it, but I don't think Wendell Moore is an NBA player. I don't. And I've been saying that for a while now, and he's unfortunately making me look smart right now. I think he is what in baseball is called a quad A player, a guy who shines against lesser competition, but when called upon to be an NBA top caliber player, simply doesn't have the skill set. I think he's a smart player. I think he knows what should be done on the court.
The 9th man job, Brett, when you have 3 players down, might be that of a reliable quad A player.
Well, I think that the Wolves are talented enough and on a trajectory of wanting to compete that those are precious minutes for Leonard Miller and or Josh Minott too. And I'd rather see their development get bumped along.
Yeah, but I think, no offense, but I think that's like old school Wolves thinking. Like, I think you're saying I'd be intrigued to see where their development is and using those minutes as development. And should you be doing that when you're 13-4, or should you be choosing the most?
If you have an automatically better alternative,
yeah, no,
and you're saying the automatically better alternative is a quad A player.
I'm just bringing it up. I don't know. I'm not sitting here saying I think it should. It's actually really similar to the whole Shake thing. Up higher in the rotation, where it's like, I don't love that answer either. But
if Shake Milton can give you 26 good minutes and Troy Brown Jr. can give you 26 good minutes, then you don't play 8.
Yeah. That's probably the answer. That's probably the answer. It's just it's an interesting thought exercise to say, if it was to go 9, who would it be? And it's not a back-to-back. They play Thursday night, and then they head to Charlotte for Saturday.
They have a really wonderful schedule. You talk about a break in the season.
Yeah, it's because they've had a hard schedule, man.
They have, but I mean, not only they have actually had a good schedule in terms of opponents' rest advantage and disadvantage.
That's true.
And they have just phenomenally great rest advantage here. I mean, they play tonight, then they play Charlotte on Saturday afternoon, and they don't play again until what, Wednesday or something? Tuesday?
That's when Wednesday is the Wemby game. Yeah. Right. Plenty of time for Ant to get back.
3 or 4 days off before you play San Antonio, and then a couple days off before you play Memphis.
Yeah.
I mean, No,
that's a good point.
Those are 4 games. Those are 4 of the 8 worst teams in the NBA.
I think we talked through this. I think the answer is 8. Just go 8 tonight.
Okay.
Right? Like, I mean, because of that reason. I think
you are your mind works in theoreticals more naturally than mine does.
All right, let's move over to Rudy. Obviously, we were talking about him so much over these, I guess, just all season. But I want to talk with you about it here, just kind of for the last segment. And
sure,
defensively, what we're seeing with this team. I I mean, you asked him a handful of different questions after the Oklahoma City game. I can just sit next to you, listen to your questions. Like, you have a fascination this season in what I think is the fascinating part of Rudy's defense, which is how many different ways he's playing defense and being asked to play it, agreeing to play it, and doing so. That Sacramento game, I wasn't there, but I watched it the day after, and that was like the one
That was the
time,
first team
yeah, that I was like,
that
damn,
blitzed
Rudy.
them.
But I was just like, you got to get out there in the pop. They're running that like
Yeah.
Spain stack action,
It
whatever, and
was
Rudy
too,
wasn't
too
getting out there.
fast. I mean,
Yeah.
the Wolves had been riding pretty high, and Sacramento, it was the Phoenix loss was a rest loss, an overtaxed loss. Sacramento, as weird as it sounds, was a trap game. I really think that they did not think that the Kings were that good. And I've been watching the Kings when De'Aaron Fox plays for them, and they are a really good team. They're a lot of fun to watch. And they came out with like vintage Spurs like ball movement, and I think that just the Wolves mentally were not ready to play that game in the first or second quarter. Maybe that's on Finch. But I think that they lost that game in the first half. They came back from 22 down, but the Kings the Kings were a number 3 seed last year. The Kings regard themselves as a really good team, and they're not going to be flustered by that. But to your greater question, they have Rudy. Whenever the Kings come to town, Rudy is thinking one thing: this guy Sabonis and I beat the shit out of each other, and that's what's going to happen this time, And so Rudy's not thinking about, hey, I got to go guard, 4 or 5. What's this guy's, shooting from 20 feet?
Yeah, we're doing the, I guess, classic Dane and Britt thing of like, everything's been awesome except for this one thing, and this is what we're going to talk about is the one thing. I just mean that to be like, man, the thing I've been like most wowed by with Rudy is the diversity of defensive coverage.
Absolutely.
And that was the one where it was like, hey, need a little bit more from you there. And I think it's the pop game, but it's particularly the pop game against fast ball movement, and when multiple bigs can pop. Like they were running kind of like, that like Hornsey V thing that the Wolves run, or there was Spain pick and roll, and Rudy was staying back deep there and was pop, and he wasn't getting all the way out there, which is why I thought it was very encouraging to see how aggressive he was on the perimeter against Chet in the Oklahoma City game, defending against the pop. Honestly, whether it was man like it was in the first half, or even when it was, Rudy's ability to contest the perimeter in that Oklahoma City game while in the center position of a 2-3 zone. I honestly, man, I've never, like, that doesn't happen in basketball. You don't normally ask the big to do that, but that's like that was the perfect example of where Finch has been like, we're letting our great defensive player freelance and do stuff that you wouldn't normally empower a defensive player to do. Like he's drawn the comparison to with Drew Holiday when he coached him in New Orleans. Like Rudy can do it. It's just weird. He's got to want to do it in his head. He has to think like, this is the right thing for me to do. Like Finch can suggest it and push it or whatever. But when what Finch wants to do and what Rudy wants to do defensively is the same thing, lights out. Like
right. And I think some of that is the quality of the locker room. I think that Rudy is no longer a tolerated presence on this team anymore. And I think it's because he has earned Chris Hine, who you had on Monday, wrote, I thought it was an excellent piece that he wrote in the Strib. I've written about it a lot, but I haven't gone to the sources, specifically Elston Turner and some of these other guys. And I haven't, I've talked to Rudy about it. I've talked to Fitch about it, but I just thought it was put together really well. Yeah. And the part that I really enjoyed about it was just the flat out statement that Rudy's movement allows guys like Ant and Conley or whoever, the smalls, to play on ball more confidently. That is one of the reasons Ant has improved so much on defense, and one of the reasons why I think that relationship is an easy relationship now. I mean, when Rudy and Ant talked about each other last year, you could feel the tension in what they were saying. They were choosing their words carefully. Ant wasn't ragging on Rudy's shirt, or whatever, I mean, you wouldn't have that ease. And that's because everybody kind of acknowledges that Rudy Gobert is an old dog learning a tough new trick, and everybody is benefiting as a result of that. And that's great for the locker room. It's been tremendous for the Wolves defense, and it gives you your best offensive player and arguably your best defensive player a bond that is crucial. So, credit to Rudy. And I've ripped Rudy plenty. I mean, I was very disappointed by Rudy's play last year, and I just gave up on the trade. I would have been fine with me if they broke that up. The fact that they didn't, I think, kudos to Conley and Finch for keeping the faith, and Dell Demps and the others and the big Rudy guys in the front office, but also tribute to Rudy for being able to adapt at a time when he could have pulled the prima donna thing, which was what he looked like last year.
You know what I noticed last year? They called him when we were asking questions about him, or you just heard him talking. They called him Rudy last year, and this year they call him Big Ru.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
having a nickname.
That's not nothing.
I know.
That's
right.
not nothing, dude.
I agree. Couldn't agree more.
It's
like Conley had to be bite sooner or later, right?
To the Conley point, though, it's kind of the Mike Conley theory of takes a year with Rudy.
Yeah, you're right.
Like that just keeps, I think, in so many different ways playing out. And on
the other hand, I do think that the bigger difference is that in Utah, it takes a year to learn how to play with Rudy. It doesn't take a year for Rudy to learn how to play with others, because Rudy hadn't done that. You played Rudy's way in Utah, and if you didn't, you were Donovan Mitchell, and things had to change.
Mm-hmm. Want to hit on anything else in particular? I mean, it feels like it's been a long time since we've chatted on here. I mean, me and Jace did a lot of specifics from the Oklahoma City game yesterday, but anything bigger picture that we didn't touch on here?
Well, I mean, I'm always thinking about the league in general. And first of all, the Orlando story right now is really fun, and I think I don't understand why. Well, I do understand why. They're small markets and they're not showmen, but guys like Daigneault and Mosley are not getting enough press. They're not getting enough flowers for what they're doing. I mean, these guys, OKC's roster and the Magic's roster are overperforming their talent. And that is good coaching or great coaching. They
just do what, I mean, that was just like what and granted, it took Oklahoma City like a while to figure out the Wolves zone, right? The second half there.
Right.
But then they did at the end of the game, and it felt like, just watching it, obviously I wasn't in the huddle, it just felt like the players just did exactly what Daigneault told them to do in the huddle. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that isn't...
No, they're extremely well disciplined. And
there's something about having young players too, I think, and this goes to Orlando, where you have you start coaching these players when they're really young. They really have like undefined like futures in the league. even, kind of just like your bench guy, like a Cole Anthony or like an Aaron Wiggins from Oklahoma City, like all these guys that kind of grew with these coaches. And I know Wiggins and Anthony have different roles, but I guess that's kind of the point, is it's like these guys that weren't stars had to find their way into becoming role players who could blossom into more in the league. And I feel like that just is such a product of like the organization putting the coach in place to foster that environment. And you watch those young teams that are good.
And think of how hard that must have been for Mosley, because Jonathan Isaacs and Cole Anthony in their respective roles were regarded as cornerstones. Right. And both of them are now coming off the bench. Cole Anthony was going to be the playmaker, the guy, Yeah. They dumped Fultz. They got Fultz and it didn't work out there. And Isaacs
Fultz is still there. He's just hurt.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, in terms of, I think that they don't need Fultz. It's pretty obvious to me. And yet Mosley will go. Remember that really cool lineup they had last year where like 4 of the guys were 6'10" or bigger. Yeah. Just this crazy stuff where Franz Wagner was playing the 2. That stuff is, that team is fun. And that team, I love the fact that they're 13-5. They won 8 in a row. And I wouldn't want to play them right now. I mean, they are, when you watch them on League Pass, man, Banchero's great. The Wagner brothers, Mo Wagner, you don't necessarily get it every time, but when he comes off the bench ready to play once of every 3 games, he's a handful, man. He's, the Wolves have seen it. He's a notorious Wolves killer, but he's also a little bit of a jerk, which adds another little tension to the whole thing. Yeah. And then, I like that team a lot. And Jalen Suggs coming along, all of a sudden he's been given a chance. It's this classic thing where all eyes are on the high draft pick. They have a disappointing year. And as people begin to forget about them, that's when they begin to internally improve.
Those stories rule.
Yeah, they're fun. And so, hats off if you have League Pass, or hopefully they'll be on national TV a little more often. If you have a chance to watch them and you like basketball, they're a really fun team right now. The Thunder, obviously, I've loved the Thunder now for about a year and a half. Jalen Williams, I don't see enough. I don't do drafts, and every time I do a draft, and a guy I like, and I'm sure everybody has this experience because they do a lot more than me, but Desmond Bane and Jalen Williams are 2 guys that I just thought, hey, I really like that guy. They'd be good on the Timberwolves. And then they turn out to be really good NBA players. It makes you feel, you're ratified, you think, all right then, good for me.
It is cool with, I was thinking about this during the Thunder game, and it's good to put Orlando in this group too. Is like Minnesota, Orlando, Oklahoma City, Sacramento, like were so bad a few years ago.
Right.
And for that to turn to the degree that it has is just I'd like that the league can do that.
Right.
And it didn't used to do that. Like last decade, it didn't do that.
Right.
And I don't know, there's probably a more like existential conversation about drafting and front officing and building an environment, but it's cool.
My take is that lazy front offices are still, or maybe pressure front offices with hedge fund owners or people who quote unquote want to win, go to the super team option. And that's become one of the definitions of a super team, is that you have established players that have become established stars. That's how you get the super team. Well, by definition, that's an old team. And I think what we're seeing is that age is more important than you think. Mm-hmm. And LeBron is a freak of nature, and that super team, Ray Allen was a fountain of youth until he fell off the table. And Chris Bosh, he was great until a weird injury sidelined him. But that is a rare instance, you know.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Where do you put the Wolves in that, like, building organically to super team gradient, I guess? Because they did trade for, I mean, I know it's not the typical super team construction or whatever, but it has a pretty big element of that in trading all those first for Rudy.
I think the audacity of what they were trying to do was, I don't put them in the super team category simply because the lazy minds, the casuals in the NBA didn't immediately jump up and down and say, this team is going to be awesome. You know, I think that when you put a Kevin Durant and a Devin Booker and a Bradley Beal together, it's very tempting to go, oh, well, they're going to run the table or whatever. Brooklyn with what they did, Dallas with Kyrie and Luka. Oh, it's going to be great.
Clippers,
And Cat and Rudy didn't inspire that. And Ant wasn't ready really at the time when they made that deal. So I don't regard it as a super team move. I do regard it as a splash. And that's a slightly different approach. I think that for whatever reason, and I still, at the end of the day, if you put a gun to my head, I wouldn't have made the Rudy deal. That doesn't mean it hasn't worked out really well. But I think that was Tim Connelly trying to make a splash in a new position, new ownership, wanting to take over, send a message to the old guy who's running the team.
But in a different, somewhat sort of different way than like what Phoenix did with their
absolutely. It wasn't. It's usually that you're getting guys who they're top 15 players, and you get 2 or 3 of them together. Even at his best, Rudy was on the fringes of that top 15 discussion, and Cat, even at his best, in practice rather than reputation, rather than what he could become, was on the fringe of that. You didn't have a guaranteed alpha star. You didn't have like, all right, KD is an alpha star. I would argue Booker is the better player now, but you still had an alpha guy. KD, multiple finals MVP, Kawhi and Paul George, guys that are just, you go, oh, they got Paul George,
Yeah, it didn't. Well, the Wolves with Ant and Cat didn't seem one player away from being a contender.
Right, exactly.
And that's like the whole kind of concept of the super team.
And that's what's cool about this team now is that
agreed.
They have put together, I mean, Rudy and Conley is a skeleton key. Slow-Mo is a skeleton key in his own way. You have different people now that are unlocking things. And Rudy's not being stubborn, and Ann is maturing. I like, I don't think it's a secret. Anybody who's watched the Wolves for a long time, it's very hard not to love this team. I love defense. I love the way they're playing. I love the fact that we started this pod by saying that Anthony Edwards' biggest improvement is probably as a teammate, meaning that he cares enough about the way the team operates to understand the context by which he can be his best. And some of that is age, but some of that is just inspiration. I think he began to say, all right, I'm going to be that guy.
I just saw a tweet come through. A shoot around is going on right now as Britt and I record this. So we are obviously not there. And Chris Hine, who is there, tweeted out Troy Brown Jr. likely to get the nod as the start in Ant's place. And John tweeted that Kyle Anderson implied that Ant, when they talked to him, Ant wasn't going to play tonight. So I guess just if people are listening to this and bookending that conversation there, like we said though earlier, just because that role is going to change throughout the course of the game.
And we'll watch,
shake, whatever.
That shake slow-mo spacing will be a factor, I think, tonight. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
That's a good point. Yep. and maybe it's just more initiation than from Shake rather than corner spacing. That's what I don't like, is when Shake is being treated as a corner spacer, and it doesn't look like he likes it either, or it doesn't look.
On the other hand, putting him on the ball has not been fun this year.
That's true. Yep. Sounds like somebody who you would, if things were healthier, you would take out of the rotation for a little while to put back in, but that's not where they're at. And in reality, like this team's very unlikely to have 17 healthy players at a time in any game the whole season. That's just,
and as a final coda for this, I think it was 4 weeks that J-Mac was going to be reevaluated. I think it's been 4 weeks. So
yeah, I saw him pregame running stairs, like at Target Center before the Thunder game.
It'd be great to have him back.
Yeah, it'd be just such a different element of something you can plug in.
Do you know that his net rating as we speak is like plus 24?
Of course. All right. Check out that just if I can plug a couple things here. Check out Britt's piece over at Min Post. I think it was proper and maybe a little under tapped into how special Ant season has been thus far this year, and how much, like, that's what I always say. It's like we set these expectations as the season begins, and when something is significantly lower than the expectation, we should be hammering that. And when something's significantly higher than the expectation, we should be hammering that too. And I think we've done that with Rudy throughout the course of this year. We should be doing that with Ant as well. So I'd recommend checking out that piece. Obviously, game tonight, and I will talk with Kyle about what happens against Utah on Friday morning. Again, just another plug to, if you can just hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. If you are doing that helps us a lot, getting that. And then TikTok, Instagram, DaneMooreProductions_podcast. All those things, again, help us out. If you can't help by supporting a sponsor or anything like that, maybe you're out of market or whatever. Any little thing, we always do appreciate that. Britt, I appreciate you doing this, and I will see you in a few hours at the game.
Sounds good.
All right. Until Friday with Kyle, he's Britt at Britt Robson on Twitter. I'm Dane at DaneMooreNBA. Till then, peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.